Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Dose of Science. You want a double dose? There we go. Our special guest today is Oliver De Volpi, who's McGill's executive chef. And also joining us today, Ada McLean, Emily Shore, and Jonathan Jerry from our office. But we'll get started with Oliver telling us what an executive chef is and what he does.
Well, thank you for having me. Normally, I'm doing a little bit of cooking, a lot of managing of cooks and of the food service, ordering and meeting with suppliers. But I have to say the last 10 months have been a real different experience for an executive chef because I'm now in charge of a very small food service and a lot of employees that are out on campus. Some people may see that are sitting in the fronts of buildings and are roaming around buildings, working as safety ambassadors or high-touch cleaners and things like that.
A little bit of background. How did you become a chef in the first place?
I dropped out of university and I had to find something to do. No, I had a passion for cooking. I was used to cook with my mother often. I always loved it. And when I did drop out of university, I needed some other outlet. And I thought, whether I went into this or not as a profession, it was some skill that I'd have for the rest of my life. I've always enjoyed it. I love the cooking part of it. I do a little bit less today than I used to. And yeah, a little bit of education here in Montreal, up in the Laurentians, and then some touring with some hotels.
And now you're looking after all McGill's food services, which is quite
I was going to say, not exactly. We work with some contract food providers, and they do some of the food service on campus. We have some independent people that are doing it. All of it under our department, though, and I do take care of two of the larger residences with about 100 McGill employees.
Now, obviously, since last March, everything has changed in the world, including everything that you do. And for a while, we didn't have any students in residence. Now we do have students in residence. And there are rules about what they can and cannot do, right?
Yes.
I understand that they're not allowed to eat together, right?
At this moment, they're bringing their food back to their rooms. This may change in the weeks to come, but that's what they've been doing for the last 4 months.
So they come down to get the food?
They do. In some cases, we've been delivering to rooms, but most cases, they're still coming down to the dining halls, picking up food in a very safe environment and walking back to their room with it.
Yeah, can you walk us through that process? Like, how does that work? I was a student or in RVC, so that was my cafeteria. So when I picture people coming down the elevator, walking down the halls, narrow halls, lining up, with the trays, how does it look now?
Right. So there are no trays at the moment. The halls, like most of elevators and halls are limited to the number of people even. I think the halls are a little bit more difficult to control. They're always wearing masks. They're coming down to the dining hall where they're counted on the way in. So there's no more than 20 people in the dining hall. And this is a dining hall that normally fits 250. No more than 20 come in. They walk through. Most of them are using our eco clamshell, so a reusable takeout container that we're sanitizing. They get their meal. They'll flash their card at the cash, where a cashier will be behind plexiglass and like that, and they'll walk out to their room. Oh, they're sanitizing their hands before they're coming in. They're being checked by someone who's at the door to make sure that they're even allowed to be coming in, because they're not letting people from outside of residences into the buildings at this moment.
Have you had to make any changes in the food?
Absolutely. Salad bars who knows if they'll ever come back, the famous salad bars of these cruise ships and restaurants and stuff like that. So we had to eliminate all of the self-serve. You can't even serve yourself a coffee today. They'll serve it behind the cash for you. And we are looking at some wireless apps that will control one of the coffee machines that you could actually order on your phone and then just scan a QRC code and it would make you a coffee like that. But that whole part of make it yourself or dress it yourself that was the thing that students wanted to do is what's been eliminated.
Yeah.
You know,
What
students
about the
used to,
actual meals themselves, the food?
well, for sure, you know, where we used to be making stir fry and students would choose out their vegetables that they wanted in their stir fries, that no longer happens. Anything that has too many garnishes that need to go on afterwards, you know, soup has become almost something of the past because you can no longer serve yourself soup. So once someone's serving you a bowl, it's just not as interesting. As I told you, the salad bar is completely gone, a lot more grab and go. And yes, there is a lot more waste. Hopefully on my side, most of it is compostable, but there is a lot more waste.
Wow.
Jonathan, what do you think? Overreaction or not?
I mean, no, it seems fair. And I wanted to ask Oliver, you know, what was it like in the beginning of the pandemic versus now, when we didn't know very well how it was being transmitted, and we were getting a lot of questions about, could it be transmitted through food? You know, what were you hearing about this? Were people afraid of even touching the food or the containers of the food? And how has that evolved in your mind with now, when we have a good idea of how this virus is being transmitted?
Well, what's amazing is at the beginning is, if you all remember, I mean, masks weren't available, they weren't the norm. So we were continuing to work, we were trying to keep a distance. There was no plexiglass up anywhere. And we tried to continue to feed the students in the best way we could. We knew right away we needed to shut down things like the salad bar and the self-serve options, but we didn't know what we know today. Is it an overreaction? I don't think so. I mean, I'm not comfortable going into a restaurant today. So why would a student suddenly be a lot more comfortable coming in if we weren't taking all of these precautions? It's a good question. I mean, you're the scientist. You would probably know a lot more than me. We're trying to follow along with what is needed and stay ahead of the curve, I'm going to say, because you know, when you walk into a place like RBC, you do feel a lot safer than most places, I'll say, on the university. I mean, the place is spotless. There's someone at the front who's sort of checking you in. You know, there's sanitizing liquid and stuff right when you walk in. There's, you know, everyone's wearing a mask. You're coming through this very clean and well-lit place where you're not touching anything the whole way through. So I think that we're doing a pretty good job. And I guess the next step is to get them back to be able to sit down to eat in the next few weeks. Hopefully we'll be there.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay, let's go to Ada. And from the student side, I mean, Ada doesn't live in residence, but nevertheless, student who has to watch dollars and etc. Any changes that you've made in how you eat since this all started?
Well, it's been with most of the on-campus dining options closed to non-resident students. It's actually been a bit difficult as a graduate student because we've been in the lab pretty much the entire pandemic. But restaurants are often closed. All the on-campus dining is largely closed to us. So if anything, we've gotten a bit better at bringing lunches, making coffee in the lab instead of going to Tim's all the time. But I'm curious, actually, and I'd love to hear what Oliver says, if you were affected at all by the food shortages, because that was, I remember right at the beginning of the pandemic, we stocked up and then I realized we forgot to buy flour. And I just felt like that was such a fundamental failure of, we stocked up on like chips and pop and food, you know, healthy food too, and we forgot flour. So I can only imagine you guys were affected by those shortages too.
Well, amazing enough, not much, because what happened was we shut down the time that the shortages really got going. And remember, we do keep a large inventory, you know, in the dining halls, where at any given time we probably have, you know, $30,000 worth of food on hand. And so we managed to get until about the middle of April before any shortages started to affect us. And then at that point, we really did almost shut down. We only had a few hundred resident students that were left. They couldn't get home that we were feeding, and that we had plenty of inventory to handle. I lived through it like you at home, where yeast was gold. I mean, if you could get a pack of yeast or a bottle of yeast, you were in person with everyone doing breads from home and things like that. Yeah, and I feel for you, Ada, that, you know, on campus there's nothing for you. Last semester we tried to open up next to McConnell, the little cafe that's there, And, with 15 people coming a day, it just didn't make sense after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's leave COVID aside for a moment here and talk about student dining habits, because I know that over the years you've changed your offerings, right, towards a quote healthier diet. Traditionally, student diets were pizza, chips, Coke, right?
Right.
But now, at least up until the whole COVID business, I mean, your offerings changed dramatically. And offering
Oliver has chia pudding at the RVC. That I remember.
There is chia pudding for sure. Listen, we make Dr. Joe's goulash still at RVC on a probably, I'm going to say more than monthly basis, but it's in a rotation. So it comes up probably every 3 weeks. For sure, it's something that we're very proud of. It's something that was happening in other universities. So we're not the first. We're just hoping to be the best follower in this case, where we're keeping up with the times of healthier diets, more local and sustainable food offerings and like that. And for sure, we've seen how the bottle of Coke has, diminished down to very little. It's still being offered. We're not serving things like poutines or anything on a regular basis for sure. Burgers are just one choice. You can have a vegetarian burger, a chicken burger, a beef burger that's done, with local beef any given day you want. But at least that there's those other choices. But we're really proud of what we're doing for, our home zone with our menu rotation, what we were doing at the salad bars, and what we're trying to do, with grab and go and all that stuff on campus.
Have you seen a demand from students for more vegetarian dishes?
There's no question. McGill, from a university point of view, is way ahead of most, and universities are way ahead of the population. We're serving over 40% of our meals are vegetarian. And I don't believe it's because 40% of the students are vegetarian, but 40% of the meals are vegetarian, which is quite remarkable just from the time I came in. At RVC on most days, and I talk about RVC just because Emily mentioned it first, but on most days there are 2 vegetarian choices and 1 animal protein choice, in the home zone, and everything else you can get, from burgers to pizzas to pastas made to order, sushi, all of these things have vegetarian options in them.
What do you say? I have 2 questions. One is, you're referring to the home zone. What is that?
Well, that's, the traditional steam table where you see someone serving you these meals that are more traditional, more hearty, more of what you would get when you were a kid. And it could be, whether you're, from another country or even from here, you're talking about anything from, just a lasagna. And yes, they'll make vegetarian lasagnas and everything like that. But to that, to Thai chicken curry, to, butter chicken, to even, I guess, roast beef on some days.
Okay, like home cooked favorites, kind of.
Right. Well, the more traditional meals that you would get like from at home, where then you're going to go over and circle around and see things like pastas made to order with, 3 or 4 different pastas and all the garnishes and all that stuff, soups that are made always from scratch. And that when we're talking about vegetarian, that we're creaming it with a liquid tofu, so there are definitely options all around, and the home zone just is probably what attracts about 30-40% of the people. So it's one of the biggest choices.
Do you see any difference in gender in terms of demand of vegetarian foods? Because according to the literature, girls are much more likely to be vegetarians than guys.
I don't have statistics because we work with meal plans and stuff like that, but from a personal point of view, I see about 2 to 1 with female students eating vegetarian much more than male students.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Can I just ask one more thing? I know a lot of things in COVID, when COVID started, like you said, goodbye to the salad bar and the self-serve options, and there's more waste, although you're trying to make it more compostable and everything. Now that time we're hitting up to 10, 11 months here, do you find, I'm wondering if a challenge for you, because you talk so passionately about the healthy options and everything and the garnishes and the soup bases, do you find it's been a challenge to keep the nutritional quality of the foods throughout this time, and moving forward, how we can live in a COVID world, but also still retain some of that made the McGill food system better when you came in.
Yeah, well, listen, it's a challenging time for sure, and those that are adapting are actually thriving, and those that haven't, which is still the majority, are having a hard time. We're lucky enough to have this clientele that's a little bit captive, so we're getting a little bit more of a leeway in the time to adapt. But for sure, I mean, we need to be putting these beautiful looking salads into bowls so that a student can pick it up, since they can no longer get a salad bar. And the only option they have is with their sort of meal of the day. They'll get some green lettuces with, maybe one or two garnishes and a cup full of vinaigrette that will be pre-portioned for them. So the options aren't great if we're not adapting, and we're trying to do that. We have twice as many people making to-go meals now than ever before, and I think we're getting there. It was a struggle for sure for students for the first little bit. We weren't even open for the month of up until the end of December. We were open basically in January in RVC, Bishop Mountain Hall. There's no students up there, and we've been closed for the entire year. The other two residences have been open, but with very small services. So this is something that we're now getting into the swing of, and we're finally, I think, offering some pretty decent choices compared to what was there just, 3-4 months ago.
You oversee a lot of employees, many of whom basically aren't needed, right?
Right.
So what's happening with them?
Well, McGill, for good reason or through some loyalty to the employees, have not laid off any of the regular employees. So our employees are now sort of split in three, where 1/3 of them about are doing food service in RVC, which is the only open dining hall that McGill employees work in. 1/3 of them are working in housing. So in taking care of the hallways, the study hubs, things like that in the residences, so that they can make sure it's cleaner, safer, more secure for access and stuff like that. And then another 1/3 of them are working out on campus in buildings like yours, where they'll be at the door saying, "Are you wearing your mask? Could you sanitize your hands? And do you know that elevator only takes..."
Yeah, I've had a lot of your food service people playing security guard in my office.
Yeah, they've reported you once or twice to be Dr. Joe. So
and they'd rather be in the kitchen. There's no question about that.
No question. But I'm going to give them full credit. I mean, these are people that haven't moved from some of their jobs in 15, 20 years, and now you're asking them to change their schedules, to change where they work, to do something completely different. And in most cases, they've joined in this quite happily, I'm going to say, whether it's because it's a break from food service, or whether it's just a new challenge, or they realize that, without this, we wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something else. I mean, I do a fair bit of cooking, and I've had chances to kind of even get into the business side of it, which I've never really done. But we did at one point get as far as trying to scale things up. And that presented a lot of difficulty. So, for example, when I was making my vegetarian goulash, which you referred to, I would normally make it, in a 2-liter pot, 3-liter pot maybe. But if you're going to try anything commercial, I mean, you're cooking in these giant steam vats, or right? And what I found was that you can't just scale it up. I don't even know why it doesn't work, but it doesn't work. You can't just multiply everything 10 times and have it come out the same. I mean, do you find that cooking in these giant steam pots is just a different world? You have to do everything different?
I never thought about that.
You have to adapt for sure. And one of the reasons is, as soon as you throw 20 pounds or 30 pounds of something in to one of these steam kettles or a braisière or something like that, it doesn't necessarily sear like it would in a frying pan. You throw 20 kilos in of cold material, and that whole pot or that cools down, and
Yeah.
instead of searing, it now boils, and it's not the same taste. But we definitely have equipment that allows us to do a lot of these things better than you would ever be able to do at home. I mean, we do make whatever it is, 80 liters of, spaghetti sauce at one time, and it comes out very well because they've adapted the recipe and they know how to use these larger piece of equipment. But Dr. Joe, you're welcome to come in anytime and we'll do the recipe with you. You've been in the kitchen. I'm going to give him credit. This is our longest standing judge for our student Iron Chef event.
Yes.
And we weren't able to have one last year, but you've been with us for.
Well,
like
that's always
7 or
been
8
fun
years.
to do, to judge the Iron Chef. And I'm continually blown away by what these students can do.
Yeah.
I mean, they produce absolutely gourmet meals, beautiful presentation, and there's a lot of talent there.
I came one year with Joe, and the talent and the taste. It was amazing. I don't even know how one could judge that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, so thank you, Dr. Joe, for being there all the time with us. But I think that's the whole thing that's changed in food in the last 20 years is, chefs have become a little bit of superstars where, half the shows on TV are about, cooking or cooking fast or cooking better, cooking bigger. And students, young people love this, and they all want to be, some type of culinarian person where they're creating something amazing like they're seeing on TV.
There was a great new show that just premiered last Sunday, Tucci, doing a tour of Italy, a food tour. Yeah. And this episode was on pizza, which originated in Naples. And of course, the original pizza is just pizza margherita, right? With nothing but tomato sauce, mozzarella cheese, and some basil on top. But they were really going on and on about the tomatoes and the importance of what kind of tomato they use. And the one that they were really hyping was this, what is it, San
Marzano?
Which one?
San Marzano, I think, because we have here. Yeah.
Right. So that's to say that is what has to be on a pizza. I assume that's not what you use when you make these giant vats of pizza of tomato sauce.
Funny enough, we are using them for September, October, because we're getting these amazing San Marzano tomatoes from our own farm in St. Anne de Bellevue. We really are. So you need to go out there and they'll sell you a bushel of tomatoes and you can make your sauce yourself. So September, October, and even into the beginning of November, that's most of the tomato sauce we're using. And then later on than that, yes, we're going with commercial canned tomatoes for sure.
Now, a lot of people say that the commercial canned tomatoes from Italy, from that very farm in Naples, are better than what you would get from fresh tomatoes here.
Listen, I think it depends. They're picked, remember, at their top ripeness. Tomatoes are just one example. Peaches are the other example. It's perfect to think. When they're canning peaches, they're canning the ripest peach, and it's going into a can and sealed within 12, 14 hours, whatever it is, of being picked. So you're getting the best peach you can in that can. And when you're buying them in a store, you're getting sort of ones that were picked 5, 6, 8, 10 days ago, and you're getting sort of a second quality. Funny to think like that, but it's true. And the tomatoes are a little bit the same thing, but there's nothing better still than a fresh tomato.
Ada, you like to cook, you like to eat. What do you say about the tomato business?
I use canned tomatoes for pretty much everything, especially in the winter. We don't buy tomatoes much because they're so out of season, so they're so much more expensive. And get a giant 800 milliliter can of tomatoes for 99 cents. That's hard to beat.
Have you ever tried the San Marzano tomatoes?
I haven't. No.
Okay, there's a little task for everybody.
I have. So my husband is a huge cook and the watching of the shows and the ingredients, and then I modify, and then I don't hear the end of it from him. But we do have 2 cans of San Marzano tomatoes that we're actually planning to use one tonight for our tomato sauce that we're making, and I will report back. Apparently they're the best. So
Jonathan, you into tomato?
I actually hate tomatoes, so I'm in the minority. I don't like Italian food. But we were talking about Italian cuisine. I was wondering if you have been inspired, Oliver, by cuisines from other countries in the past few years. Has sort of the culinary repertoire at McGill opened up or changed in the past decade or so, for example?
For sure. I can't even keep up. I mean, the students' demand on this is just more than we can do. Everything needs to be, ethnic food if you gave a student a choice at this moment. So we're doing even some culinary training with our employees and stuff like that to try and keep up. We have visiting cooks and chefs come in every year where they'll be doing dumplings and I'm trying to think, and Indian food but just like that, just so that we can pick up one or two things along the way, and it makes a special event for that day, but maybe we'll learn something that will continue on for the next couple of years after that.
What is the hardest food to do on a large scale?
Well, listen, I think anything that was meant to be individual is a challenge, right? So the steam table or our home zone is the opposite. It's all meant to be batch, these large batch cooking. But anything that was meant to be for one person, and we're doing this in many cases, you can come in at night and get a steak done on the grill if you want, but it means that there's one cook there doing one or two people's meal instead of one cook doing 40 or 50 people at a time. And then there are a lot of challenges we still have not mastered, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm embarrassed about that. Making a fresh pizza dough that goes in the ovens that we bought especially for this. So we have these ovens that cook pizzas in 1 minute and 30 seconds, but we've tried all sorts of fresh pizza doughs in there and we're still not successful. And we're still using a somewhat pre-cooked pizza dough that we're buying because we haven't found the solution.
Oh, that sounds like a fun challenge.
Yeah. Well, fun and embarrassing at the same time that here I am, a chef, admitting we can't get a pizza dough right, but yet I only make pizza dough from scratch at home. And yet when we're putting it on these grills, either sticking to the grill, not cooking through, it's a little bit of a challenge.
Wow.
In the show on Sunday, from Naples, the pizza, and they focused in on this one pizza place which supposedly was the first one ever to make pizza. Take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, so they were making the pizza margherita very thin, but it was only in the oven for half a minute.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, if you can, even at home, and I've done a few pizza courses with students, with alumni and stuff, I turn up my oven at home to 550 degrees. That's as high as it goes. And if you can get it to go up even higher than that, I recommend it, very strongly. And the higher the temperature, probably the thinner the crust and the faster the whole thing is going to cook. And as I said, ours are doing 1 minute and 30 seconds here at work. At home, I probably leave it in for 5 or 6 minutes. But I can imagine the oven must be at 800 or something like that when they're cooking it in 30 or 40 seconds. Can
you make a pizza at home that's better than any that you'd get in a restaurant?
I'm pretty happy with what we do. My wife refuses to order anymore. There's a few out there I still like. And, just yesterday, day before yesterday, my kids sent me to Slice and Soda because they said it was an amazing pizza. I thought it was good. I thought it was very good. But no, we're pretty happy with what we do.
What kind do you make at home?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I'm making a healthier pizza. So half the time I'm going to say we're probably making half whole wheat, half white flour dough, making it very thin. And we're packing on a lot of better ingredients, where instead of pepperoni, you're probably going to get, chicken on there and spinach and feta and stuff like that. But every once in a while, we'll put a chorizo sausage on top, or we're going with bigger flavor for sure.
Who do you think makes the best commercial pizza in Montreal?
Well, commercial, if you're talking about a restaurant. The one that I've gone back to still probably the most from my childhood is probably Pandeli's. I did like what I had the other day, Slice and Soda. There are a few good ones out there.
There's a lot that have been, booming in this COVID time now. Whether it's the thinner or the thick, it's almost like a deep dish pizza, but it's not a Chicago one. It's based out of Detroit. That's what it's called. And it's called Fungool Pizza, and it's out of Pigeon Cafe on Monkland. and it started in someone's apartment, and it's like a deep dish focaccia type of thing where they also encase the sides in a cheese. It is unbelievable, but it is not like a classic pie flat. But if you want to try something different, I mean, I feel that there's everything now in the city, from slice and soda, Le New Yorkese, Disfungool. I've become a pizza aficionado.
I'm going to try.
Hey, you make pizza at home?
I do. I've had pretty good luck making it on the barbecue, actually, because it gets so much hotter than my oven. I did, however, so I make my own dough, but I use my bread maker to make the dough because I don't have time to knead for that long. I'm busy. And I recently found out that when the dough cycle completes, you're meant to still let it do another rise. So I've been making pizza dough wrong my entire life, but now it's tasted pretty good. So it can only taste better, I guess.
One of the most interesting experiences I ever had was on a cruise ship, a large cruise ship, when we had a tour of the kitchen. I mean, this was just amazing because, they serve 4,000 meals, 4,000 suppers basically at the same time, or, within a couple of hours. And you have 50 chefs. I mean, these are all trained chefs working in this gigantic kitchen, and everything works like clockwork. It's the head chef there is like the director of the orchestra, and is aware of everything that is going on, and is constantly walking around and checking. It's just an amazing thing that they pull this off.
I don't think those people will be working on cruise ship kitchens in the future. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Well, that's an industry that's going to be hard to come back.
Well, ours as well. Remember, we were serving, upwards of 12,000 meals a day on McGill campus before COVID, and who knows when that'll ever come back as well.
Yeah, and just eating in restaurants. The time that we're going to be back in restaurants, elbow to elbow with people, I don't see it.
My unborn child will be 10 years old by the time I probably are going to do that.
And it's such a shame because eating out is such a pleasure for so many people. I mean, when you think about food, it dominates our life, doesn't it? Because you get up, you think about what you're going to have for breakfast. Then you have your breakfast. Then you start thinking what you're going to have for lunch. Then you have your lunch. Then you start thinking about what you should have had instead of what you had. and then you start thinking about what to shop for supper. Then you start thinking about how to cook that supper. And then you eat that supper. Then you think about what dessert to have. And our life is spent around food.
Yeah.
It's, and so when a large part of that is taken away, you feel it, right?
I definitely agree with you.
Anyway,
there's a reasonable chance that we're moving out of Montreal within the next 12 months, and I'm sad to leave Montreal in general. I'm sad to leave my friends and everything, but I'm also just so sad that I may not get a chance to go to all my favorite bars and restaurants before we have to leave. We can't do a farewell tour or anything.
Yeah, that's true.
No, you can't. And Montreal, of course, is blessed with a huge number of excellent restaurants of all kinds. We've been spoiled here, and so we feel the pain right now. That's for sure. That's for sure. So, Oliver, one last question: what's your favorite thing to cook?
I make fresh pasta at home, probably on a weekly basis. I've been doing it since my kids were very young. Mostly spinach pasta. We're making it on, the little turn machine now on the KitchenAid that has an electric motor. All sorts of sauces. I just have always enjoyed it. I enjoy eating fresh pasta, so it's probably something that I go back to the most. But we're doing just so many things. My wife is a fantastic cook as well, and we just try and share the kitchen time. Sometimes neither one of us wants to cook, but at the same time, we're always in there doing something. So.
Is there really such a big difference between the fresh-made pasta and the pasta that you buy, the dried pasta?
All the difference in the world, but I think both have their place. There's nothing wrong with eating a dry pasta, quality dry pasta once in a while. I think they're delicious. But to me, there's nothing better than even making your lasagna with a fresh pasta dough.
A lot of work, though.
It comes, it gets easier as you do this. I'm sure if I said the goulash was a lot of work or a lot of ingredients, you'd laugh at me, but, I'll go home and make it this evening and we'll be eating it for dinner. So, in the span of an hour and a half, I can have, two kinds of pasta on the table with fresh, having made fresh pasta.
Jonathan, what's your favorite thing to make?
My diet has been changing a lot lately, so I don't know. But I do love Thai food. It's just that it doesn't always agree with me.
You don't cook Thai food, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it has to be adapted. I don't have a gas burning wok, for example. It can get very, very hot, and there are certain items that are more difficult to get in Canada. But overall, yeah, definitely, I can cook Thai.
Ada?
I also love Thai food. I don't cook it as much myself, but probably, I'm a real sucker for potato soup. My mom's potato soup is one of my favorite recipes. It's not even like the best potato soup I've ever had. It just tastes like childhood, so I like it. And I think my fiance would say my specialty is shepherd's pie. I make shepherd's pie with like veggie protein instead of beef because I'm one of those female vegetarians you were talking about. So that's my thing. I guess in Quebec we'd call it pâté chinois.
Yeah, potatoes, when potatoes are properly cooked, you can't beat that. You can make them so many different ways. Emily, final word.
Well, of what we like to cook?
Yeah.
We've been making a lot of, these are the rotation things, what we have in rotation is tofu stir fry. We've been doing a lot of that pretty much like every week. I have a really good recipe. I'm not a vegetarian solely, but we do eat a lot of that. Then I've been making eggplant parmesan a lot, and very good. I'm really getting into the groove every week, and I have now, it's a healthy version, and so that's good. And then we just make sure protein and veggies and roasting. We roast a lot, but we are cooking a lot. But yeah.
Eggplant parmesan is good when it's.
Yeah, I know. I make it good.
Okay, well, I think we've made people sufficiently hungry here, and I wouldn't mind a nice pizza right now. My appetite is being whetted for that. Okay, well, Oliver, thanks very much. And what can I say? Hopefully we'll get back to some degree of normalcy, because you were making such great food there and hosting the Iron Chef competition. It was so much fun, and who knows, maybe it will be back. This thing is not going to last forever, although it will leave its footprint for a long time. So thanks very much, and thanks everyone else. Bon appetit.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.